Hi, welcome again. In this lesson, we are going to make a first commit for newly created Git repository. And also, I will show you how to make a commit from the text editor, that is, from the Visual Studio code editor. This is the very important point we need to remember because we can make long sentence commits using text editor set at the time of installing the Git. In our case, it is Visual Studio Code Editor. So let us start our working by knowing the status of the Git repository using the command git status. As we can see, both the files are not in the staging area. This staging area is also referred as index of the Git repository. So in order to add these files to the index of the Git repository, we need to use the command git add and then the file names followed by the space. So let us add the two files to the staging area now. Now, if we check the status of the Git repository of the project using git status, we can see both the files are ready to be committed. Since both the files are in the staging area and hence the color of both the files become green. For some reason, if we don't want to commit the changes to the certain files, we can immediately use the command mentioned in the Git working flow, and the same can be seen inside the parentheses of the Git status description. That is git rm cached followed by the file name. So let us work on it and see how it works. For example, here I would like to unstage the first file just for the sake of illustration using the git rm cached and then the file name. Example 1 for loop. After using the above command, if we check the status of the Git repository using git status, we can see the first file has been unstaged, means removed from the index timeline, and it is now in the untracked stage, means the out of index timeline. But the second file remains in the staging area. So I did it only to show that it works. Let us add it back to the staging area using the git add command. Now check the status. Here we can see both the files in the staging area and are ready to be committed. The files are ready to be committed means ready to be saved to our Git repository as an active files, or in other words, once we make a commit, the Git will save the files to the project permanently and also make snapshot of the index of the Git repository. It means the snapshot will be considered only when we make a commit to the project or Git repository. Don't get confused with the words Git repository and the project. The active Git repository is usually called as the working project and is usually referred as the process of the project or the status of the project. So let us do our very first commit using the command git commit -m stands for adding the message and then the commit message inside the double inverted comma. Let us call this as first commit. When we add the files to the Git repository for the first time and make very first commit, and if we have not set any username and email, Git will ask us to mention who we are. Git requires this information in order to identify which developer had made a snapshot at a particular time. So in order to add a username and email, we need to run the commands mentioned in the above message. That is git configure --global user email and then the email ID of the user. Similarly, user.name and then the name of the user. So let us configure the username and the email ID. In my case, I am using my name and the email ID of mine, but in your case, you please use your username and your email ID. Once we add the username and the email ID, we can check the same using the commands git configure --global username and then git configure --global user.email. We can see the username and email, which means Git now stores our username and email for the specific commits we make to our project with a specific branch. Now let us make our very first commit. Now if we check the status of the project using git status, we can see our working tree is clean and nothing to commit with the staged files. Now to check the commit history, we can use the command git log. Here means in the Git, everything is checksummed before it is stored and is then referred to by the checksum. This means it is impossible to change the contents of any file or directory without Git knowing about it. This functionality is built into Git at the lowest levels and is integral to its philosophy. We cannot lose information in transit or get file corruption without Git being able to detect it. The mechanism that Git uses for this checksumming is called a SHA-1 hash. This is a 40-character string composed of hexadecimal characters from 0 to 9 and from A to F, and calculated based on the contents of a file or directory structure in Git. So this is the SHA-1 hash. We will see these hash values all over the place in Git because Git uses them so much. In fact, Git stores everything in its database not by the file name but by the hash value of its contents. So in this case, the hash value is nothing but the commit ID, and then the message is first commit. In order to see the Git commit history in simple form, we can use the alternative command git log --one line. This is the most commonly used Git command to see the log history of the project. Here we can see the first 7 characters of the commit ID and the one-line message of the commit. Here I said one-line message of the commit because in real, if we add a commit in the GitHub website, we can add an additional description of the commit message. So when we use git log --one line, the log history will show only the first 7 characters of the commit ID and the first line message of the commit. Here we can also see the important thing, which is head, and it shows the currently we are in which branch and made a commit. So when we use multiple branches to be discussed later in this course, the head will point to the active branch from where we are doing our changes or commits. So head is an important thing to be considered, and we will discuss on the head in detail with a lesson dedicated for it later in this course. So now we just have to remember that head points to the branch currently we are working on. So in our case, it is the master branch created by the Git when we initialized the Git repository. So this is all about the Git first commit. In the coming lessons, we will see more on the Git commits with the Visual Studio Code editor. And for that, see you in the next lesson.